بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. مرحبا بكل الحضور إن شاء الله اليوم في كوليج ادميشن انفورميشن سيشن. إن شاء الله نستفيد مع الأستاذة ريم خالد والأستاذة زينب محمد عثمان، وإن شاء الله نتمنى سيشن مفيد للجميع. مرحبا بكم، تفضل يا أستاذ.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you so much for. Oh, can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you all so much for coming. I think there might be some people. And we are sorry for starting this session late. But thank you all for coming today. We appreciate it so much, and thank you to the House of Nubia for hosting this for our Sudani community. My name is Reem Khalid Muhammad Ali. That is my full name. And I graduated from Harvard University last year, where I studied government and computer science. And I also did a specialization in modern standard Arabic.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. My name is Zainab Mukhtar. And I am a junior at Duke University in Durham, North Carolina, studying public policy, statistics, and environmental science. And we're very excited to welcome you guys today. Thank you guys for bearing with us and being patient. And we'll go ahead and get started without further ado.
Okay, so we'll start off with kind of the simple and big questions. Why host a college information session? So the college application process is one that's really hard, especially if you don't have older siblings or your parents didn't go to college in this country. And I know for a lot of people in the Sudani community, you're likely first generation. And so as people who've already been through this process and who've had others help us along the way, we wanted to be the ones to pass on this knowledge to other people within our community and kind of give back to the people who gave us so much. And so yeah, we are here as kind of your older siblings to offer any sort of advice or assistance that you may need. And so just to kind of briefly give a run of show, what we'll do is we'll maybe present for about an hour, and for the half hour to 45 minutes left, I think that might be the speaker, but for the half hour to 45 minutes left, then we'll open the session up for any questions that you all may have and answer those, inshallah.
Okay. Yeah. The voice is kind of crazy. Hello? Okay. So I'm gonna give like an umbrella overview into like what colleges look for. That's the big question that you guys all have. What do I have to do to prepare myself to make sure that colleges see me and that I stand out? But the answer is not like a one cent answer. There's a lot that goes into it, into making sure that you position yourself as a competitive student, as someone that's academically rigorous, but also as someone who's going to positively contribute to their community. So we're going to go over this into detail in the presentation, but just to give you an idea, we're going to talk about your GPA. That's the big number that everyone seems to care about. We're going to talk about what courses you should take, what's the difference between AP, IB, honors, regular courses. We're going to talk about the big standardized tests, including the SAT and the ACT. We're going to talk about awards and honors and what it takes for you guys to make sure that you have those in your application. And then we're going to also dive into the more creative parts of the application, which include your personal essay, and that's the big essay that the admissions officers are going to read. And then we're going to also talk about recommendation letters, how to form a good relationship with your teachers, with your counselors, to make sure that you have a good recommendation letter. And then we're also going to talk about beyond just classes, but like what can you do outside of the classroom, extracurriculars, sports, and things like that.
Okay. So when do you start planning for your college applications? The answer is honestly as soon as you enter high school, which may seem like it's early, but the reason for that is because everything from your grades to your extracurriculars to your volunteer activities, colleges look at that from the 9th grade all the way through the 12th grade. So starting from your freshman year, that's when you really begin the preparation for the college application process. And so we'll start off first with coursework and grades, which is probably, I think, the most important part of the process, but not the entire part. And so colleges honestly like to see that you are taking whatever the most difficult coursework that your school offers is. And so for a lot of people, that's AP or IB classes, and we'll get a little bit more into what that is. But essentially, they'd rather see you get like a B maybe in an AP or an IB course than they would you see an A in a normal course, because they want to see that you are challenging yourself and that you're able to handle what college coursework is going to look like as well. And so in terms of IB versus AP, if you're asking the question of which one is better for colleges, the answer is that it doesn't really matter which one you do. So I did the International Baccalaureate System, which is IB.
And I did the Advanced Placement System, which is like the AP. And like being said, there's really no right answer. Every school offers something different. So I went to Wakefield High School in Arlington, Virginia, and my school simply didn't offer IB courses, but we did have the AP system, and that is what pretty much everybody in my school took. So you have to ask yourself, what courses do my school offer?
Yeah, and I went to Edison High School in Alexandria, Virginia, and they only offered the IB system, and so that's what I ended up taking. And so just to explain a little bit more about what IB is, or what International Baccalaureate is, it's essentially an international system, so it exists both in the United States and in countries outside of the United States. And it's a very comprehensive system that you start in your 11th grade, so you can take IB courses in your 11th and 12th grade, and it's called the diploma program. If you end up, you can either do where like you take individual IB classes, or you can choose to pursue an IB diploma. So when you graduate, you'll have two diplomas, your regular high school one and one that's an IB one as well. And so what this essentially is you take classes in things like IB math, IB English, IB, you have to do a language, so I did IB Arabic, and all of these different types of things, and then you also do like IB business or IB art or whatever it is. And if you choose to do the full diploma, then you'll also have 3 additional components. The first one of these is that you're going to do in your senior year of high school a 4,000-word essay called the extended essay about any topic of your choosing. You're going to do an additional course that's called Theory of Knowledge, so it's about additional 3 hours. I think you take it for 1 year. And then you're gonna do something that's called the CAS system, which is the complete application. And so you would do like additional volunteer hours, you have to do additional creativity hours, and you have to do additional activity hours. So it's an entirely comprehensive system, and if your school offers IB, I would highly recommend you talk to your counselors, you sort of get involved and try to figure out what it is and determine what's right for you. If it looks right for you to take individual classes, or if it looks right for you to do the full diploma, because either one of them is fine.
Okay, so I'm gonna talk a little bit about the AP program. I know a lot of schools in the Northern Virginia area offer AP classes. So there's some schools that will just offer individual AP courses that you can take. And there's other schools, like my school, that had the AP Capstone Diploma Program, which basically allows you to graduate with another diploma, similar to the IB one. The AP is more common in the United States. It's founded by the College Board, which we'll also talk a lot about. It's a very big educational company. But you essentially, like, you can position yourself in a competitive way depending on what your school offers. So if your school only offers AP classes, take as many of those as you can. AP Econ, AP Bio, AP Chem, like the opportunities are endless, and those are really great ways to show colleges that you can not only take a regular class, but you can take a college level class, and that really shows that you're ready for college level work, right? So if your school offers the AP Capstone Diploma Program, I would also highly recommend doing that program. It's really fulfilling. You take a certain number of classes, and you have to score a 3 or above in those AP courses. So I took classes like AP Econ and AP Human Geography and other really cool courses. And then you also have a research component, which is similar to the IB program, and that includes taking AP Seminar and AP Research. And that basically prepares you for college level research. What does it take to do research? Because a lot of these universities are not just places where you go in and take classes, but you're learning from professors who are doing research in really cool topics and really cool fields. So you want to make sure that you position yourself as someone who knows how to research, who knows what questions our society is wondering about or asking about, right? And that shows that you're not only good at taking tests and scoring well on exams, but that you're also good at thinking beyond the classroom, right? Like, how can I positively contribute to the educational community as a whole, right? To academia in general. So that's just kind of an umbrella overview into IB and AP. And again, it really goes down to what does my school offer? As long as you're exhausting and you're exhausting all the options that you have in your respective school, and you're taking as many IB or AP courses that you can, That's amazing. That's what you can control as a student. But you can't control whether your school offers IB or AP and how many courses are offered at you. So you just need to make sure that you ask the questions to your counselor, what courses and programs are offered to me, and how can I make sure that I take as many of those as I can.
Yeah, and schools will also give you a full list of the catalog of what's available to you, and they'll explain these things a lot more. And so you can always talk to your counselor, you can always talk to your teachers, and try to figure out whether this is a good system for you or not. As somebody who did IB, I would highly recommend it. I would also caveat that it's a lot of work, and so to make sure that this is something that works for you. And so what are the benefits of taking IB or AP other than just colleges caring about it? So there's two main benefits. The first one is, I guess I'll go to the second one first, but if you score high enough on the exams, so for example, the IB exam is graded out of a 7. So if you score a 6 or a 7, some schools even take a 5, on a lot of these exams, what colleges will do is that they'll actually give you course credit for it. So what that means is that, for example, let's say I got a 6 or a 7 on the IB English exam. When I go to college, I don't need to take the introductory English courses that a lot of people take. And so some schools, for example, like George Mason University or George Washington University, or a lot of schools in the area will take this credit, and it means that you're able to skip an entire semester of college essentially, and you can graduate early and you can save a lot of money on courses as well. The other advantage to this is that it adds a 1-point boost to your GPA, which is essentially your grade point average. So most people know that their GPA is graded out of a 4.0, right? And so if I get an A, that's worth like a 4.0. If I get an A minus, that's worth like a 3.7, and the scale goes down like that. So that is called your unweighted GPA. And so that's solely based on what you score in a class. So whether that's an A or an A minus or a B plus or whatever. There's something else once you get to high school called your weighted GPA. And this is basically based on if you take an honors class, an AP class, or an IB class. And so honors classes are less difficult than AP and IB classes, but they're more difficult than like the normal level of the class. And so for honors classes, you will get a 0.5 boost to your GPA. So let's say I got I scored like a 98 in my I scored like a 98 in my algebra honors class. So what that means, that translates to a 4.0, but because it's an honors class, they'll actually put it into my GPA as a 4.5. So it'll give you that boost. For IB and AP classes, they add a 1-point boost to your GPA. So if I get something that's equal to an A, they will factor that in as a 5.0. So what that means is that you're basically able to get a GPA that's above a 4.0, which is really important, especially when you're applying for kind of more difficult or colleges that have more selective acceptance rates. Then they like to see that you have a pretty high weighted GPA, because it means that you've taken the most difficult courses that are available to you at your school. It means that you're able to handle the type of work that you'll be encountering in college.
Oh, and just one more thing. I think it depends on the county. I know Fairfax County gives you a 0.5 boost for your GPA if you take honors courses. Arlington County, which is where I went to school, doesn't offer that. So make sure you ask your counselor that question and get like a confirmation so you know.
Yes. Okay, now we'll move on to standardized testing, which is probably the second most important part of your application. And so standardized tests essentially break down to 4 types of tests. The first one is the PSAT, the second one is the SAT/the ACT, and the last one is SAT subject tests. And so we'll break down each one of these. But the PSAT essentially stands for the Practice Standardized Advanced Test. And so what this is I'm sure most of you have probably heard of the SAT, which is just this, the standardized test that you essentially take for colleges. But what the PSAT is, it's also known as the NMSQT, which is the National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test. And so it's like a practice version of the SAT. The SAT is scored out of 1600, and the PSAT is scored out of 1520. And they give it to all students in the United States in their junior year of high school. And so that's your 3rd year of high school. And so it's given in October of your junior year, and basically what it does is it prepares you for the actual SAT. It has 4 sections, 2 of them cover math, and 2 of them cover like reading and writing topics. And then it's scored out of the 1520, and though the scores don't actually count as part of your college application, so colleges will not consider these scores, they do help put you on the map. So you have the option on the test, if you think you're gonna do well, to select to send your scores to colleges. On this basis, Colleges will then start sending you like emails and brochures and stuff like that, asking you to tour their college. It can also make you eligible for a lot of scholarships. So that's why it's called the National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test. There's something called the National Merit Scholarship Corporation. And essentially what they do is they have like a certain percentage in each state. You'll want to search up what the percentage is for the state of Virginia. I don't actually know it off the top of my head. But if you score high enough, it means that you're eligible for a lot of different types of scholarships that they have on their platform. So in terms of when you start thinking about preparing for the SAT, think about preparing for the PSAT first, or the SAT, like do it early on. Don't just think that this is something that you're gonna take in your senior year of high school or when you're about to start applying to colleges. I would highly recommend that you actually start preparing from your freshman and your sophomore years of high school. So that's your first and your second year of high school, because doing that type of preparation and studying for these tests is going to prepare you for what it's actually like to take the SAT or the ACT, which are the scores that eventually do get sent to colleges. And then in terms of just covering the SAT or the ACT, these are required for any type of college that you apply to, or most types of colleges that you apply to. Some colleges did, during COVID, went test optional, which means that you didn't have to submit a score. But a lot of those colleges have now reversed their policies, so you'll want to double check. And even if a school is test optional, submitting your scores really helps you be eligible for a lot more scholarships, and which is super important when we're thinking about paying for colleges, which are very expensive. And so it doesn't matter which one that you do. I did the SAT and Zainab did the ACT, and so she'll talk more about that. The SAT, as I mentioned before, is scored out of 1,600. It has 2 mandatory sections. One is the reading and writing section, and one of them is the math section. Then there's an optional additional writing section, which is like an essay. You don't have to do that. You can choose to do it if you want to, you don't. And then the advantage of the SAT is that it's essentially super scored for most colleges. What this means is you can take the SAT multiple times. Personally, I took it 3 times, and you can take it as many times as you want. Most schools recommend that you don't do it more than 5 maximum though, because it is an expensive test and it does cost money. But let's say in the first time that you take this, you scored maybe like a 700 on the reading section and you scored like a 600 on the math section, right? So this is the first time that you take the test. Both sections are scored out of 800, and that's what makes up the 1,600 score. Then the second time you take the test, maybe you score like a 600 on the reading, so you got 100 points lower, but you score like a 700 on the math, so 100 points higher. What they'll do is they'll take your reading test from the first test that you took and your math test from the second test that you took, and together you get a higher score than you did on either one of those exams. So now you have a 1,400 altogether, and you can use that to apply to colleges. So most colleges do this. I will say some schools do require you to submit all of your scores. So for example, Georgetown University is one that I know where you have to submit all of your scores. But essentially, this is the advantage of the SAT. And when you're thinking about studying for this test, there's a lot of test preparation courses out there, but they're typically super expensive and not affordable for most people. What I recommend, and what was the best resource for me, was Khan Academy. It's completely like 100% free. What you'll do is you'll take a diagnostic test first, so you'll just take a test, it'll show you your score, and then based on that, and based on the sections that it sees that you maybe scored lower on, it'll design like a personalized curriculum for you, and you're able to say, how much time do I want to spend studying every day? So for me, when I was getting closer to my test, I would spend 30 minutes to an hour studying every day for the SAT on Khan Academy. And it would like train me on the questions that I was maybe weaker in or had a harder time in. And that's what I found to be the best resource for me. No.
Yeah, I think Kareem did a really good job of like covering everything. I personally applied to college during COVID, so I tried to register for the SAT multiple times. It kept getting canceled because of COVID, but I was able to take the ACT once or twice. The difference between the SAT and the ACT is that the ACT includes an additional science section. So if you're really good at science and it's your strong suit, I would highly recommend you check out the ACT, start studying for that, because again, you want to make sure that you take a test that like kind of corresponds to what you know you're good at, right? So it's also 3 sections and an additional writing section. So there's math, there's science, and there's reading/writing. That's like multiple choice. So the thing with these tests, again, Khan Academy, a really great resource. You can also find a lot of these SAT and ACT books at your local library. Like, I would highly recommend steering clear of bookstores and going straight to where you could find them. I also had a lot of counselors at my school who had them sitting on their bookshelves, so you could also borrow them from there. Main point, like this process does seem super expensive. SAT and ACT exams are expensive. The books, the studying does seem expensive, but there are options to make this more affordable. So in terms of the SAT and ACT, if you are eligible for free and reduced lunch, or if you are from like a low-income family, it is totally okay for you to request a fee waiver, and this basically means that you can take these exams without having to pay anything. So just keep that in mind and make sure that you're asking your counselor the right questions. If you're from a low-income family, go to your counselor and tell them, I need a fee waiver. How do I do this? How do I set this all up? Because you don't want to think that you can't take the exam simply because you can't afford it. And this also includes like the college application process in general. It seems expensive, but there are options to make it more affordable, and ways to just make sure that you do it right. And then just another reminder about the SAT and the ACT. It is made to seem that like this is everything. It's really not. Like this is a component of your application. Colleges are not gonna look at your SAT and ACT score and say if your SAT or ACT score are too low, they're gonna throw you to the side. That's simply not true anymore. They really do emphasize that they take a holistic approach to your application. They wanna know who you are, but they do also care about your ACT and SAT score. So don't let this be like a discouraging factor. Use this as a really good way to show colleges that you're really smart and that you know how to take a test and that you're academically ready for college, but don't let this be your end-all be-all. And it goes on both extremes. So there are people who have 36s, which is the highest score on the ACT, and 1600s on the SAT, but don't get into Harvard and Yale. Like that's a total possibility. So keep that in mind. Remember, right now we're thinking about crafting an application. We're talking about positioning yourself as a really great student for these colleges, academically and socially, which we'll talk about a little bit. So
Yeah, and I'll just stress this. Does this work? Okay. I'll just stress this as well. You do not need a perfect score at all.
Yeah.
I went to Harvard. I did not get a perfect score on my SAT. I retook it multiple times. All of my friends that I know also did not get perfect scores on their SAT. So don't stress about that at all.
Yeah.
The last thing that we'll talk about is SAT subject tests. So these are, I think, less common nowadays, but certain schools, for example, like Harvard or Yale or Princeton, Columbia, whatever it is, some of these schools like to see you take these tests. Not necessary at all, but what they are is essentially like an additional exam you can take. Each one of them is graded out of 800, and they do cover them in multiple subjects. So there's like, I think there's like they're also called like the SAT2. So they have one for like biology, they have one for language, they have one for literature, they have one for math and different levels of math, world history. So these cover a lot of different subjects, and it essentially shows that you have mastered the subject really, really well. Now for these, I will say that there's a trick to taking them. Typically, you shouldn't submit your score for an SAT2 test, or don't take the test if you think you're gonna score below a 700 on this. If you will score above a 700, then it is good to send, and you should send it off. But if you don't, then I would recommend that you don't bother with it. It's not a really important part of the process. I took a couple of these, but most people I know haven't taken these.
Okay, so we're gonna dive into the resume, which is like, basically the idea of a resume is that when you give somebody this piece of paper, it's able to give you an all-encompassing view of like who this person is, where they've studied, what their extracurriculars are, and what they can bring to the table, right? So that's basically what your application to college is. It's you're giving these college admissions officers an umbrella overview of who you are as a student. So there's a lot of components to your resume, but the main branches that we're going to talk about today are extracurriculars, your leadership positions, your volunteering and your work, and then awards and other honors. So I'll dive into extracurriculars. A big misconception that a lot of people have is that going to college is all about studying. That's true, that's a huge component, but when you're in this college campus, you're also a part of the community. You're also a part of like this huge network of students that are trying to make the world a better place. So they want to see that that's something that you're already doing in high school, right? So beyond getting good grades in high school, which is, again, very important and should be your #1 priority, you should also think about, what am I doing outside of the classroom? What clubs am I a part of? What sports am I a part of? Like, what is it that I can show colleges I can bring to a college campus, right? So it's super important to show colleges that you're a well-rounded student, that you're able to handle intense courses like AP and IB classes, but that you're also able to be an athlete on a football team, or be a member of your local Muslim Student Association or a volunteer organization, right? Because that shows colleges that you are academically rigorous, but you're also really involved socially. in terms of like just practical tips for the application, it's much more about quality than quantity. So you'll meet a lot of people who join a lot of clubs, but they don't actually create a positive impact in any of those clubs. You need to make sure that like when you're choosing the clubs that you're a part of, you genuinely choose those that you're interested in, right? So for me, I was involved in Wakefield's Muslim Student Association, also Model UN, we both did Model UN, and there's a lot of other clubs that exist, and I found that to be the best way for me to be involved at Wakefield, especially during COVID, since my time was cut short a little bit. And I was able to use those clubs to craft a story and tell college admissions officers, when I go to Duke, I'm also going to join the Muslim Student Association at Duke. And that's exactly what I did. I started as president of Duke MSA last year, and it was a very fulfilling experience. But I was able to show the college admissions officers that I did this in high school, thus I'm going to come to college, and I'm going to do it even better, right? Because Duke, for example, is a huge university with like more than 300 student groups and thousands of students, and they want students to actually positively impact their community and be a part of the college campus. So it's beyond just like your academics, it's also like, what am I doing outside of the classroom? And again, it's all about quality. Do not get into like the trap of like joining 50 clubs. Like that's an exaggeration, of course, but make sure that you're choosing your the clubs that you're a part of wisely, and really ask yourself, why am I joining this club? And make sure that every single year you're a part of it, from freshman to senior year, that you're actually making a positive impact every year. And you dive into
I think Zainab said most of it for extracurriculars. That's exactly what it is. It's important to show that you are, at the end of the day, with your application, what you're doing is creating a story about yourself and who you are, right? So like your essay or your scores or whatever it is are not just enough to show your personality. You show that through your extracurriculars and the stuff that you choose to spend your time on outside of school as well. And so these are different for every single person. There are some that are kind of popular, so like people hear that like a lot of people like do Model United Nations, for example, or Community Service Club or something like that. I did Model United Nations because I love this type of stuff. I love talking about like politics and things like that, and I ended up studying government in college, so that's why I did it. But if you don't like that, if that's not right for you, if it's not something that you enjoy, then don't get involved with it just because, you know, it's a popular name. Do the stuff that you actually care about. And so I did a lot of different types of extracurriculars when I was in high school. Some of my most important ones were the Muslim Student Association, Model United Nations. I was part of Young Democrats when I was in high school, maybe not now with the political situation, but back then I was part of it. And then there were other things too, like I also played volleyball from when I was in 4th grade all the way until high school. And so this is something that I really enjoyed. It's something that I dedicated a lot of time to, and it kind of showed in my application that this is something I was very, very consistent in, not just something that I did for the sake of my application. Another thing that I did as well, and this is something you can do if you find that you have a gap in your school, is I founded my own club. And so mine was called Project Humanity, and what we did was like a lot of charity work for other countries, or we would raise awareness about crises that were happening around the world, especially in the Middle East and Africa. And that was kind of something that I was very passionate about, and something that I continued after high school as well. But you can really choose to do any extracurricular that you like. Maybe I did volleyball, Zainab ended up doing track and like running in high school, and so it's different for every single person, and that's what I think is important. Like, do the things that you care about, the things that you'll actually enjoy spending time in, and the things that you think you will do well. And then leadership things. Oh yeah. Oh, the house. Oh, so sorry guys. The House of Nubia is also a really great extracurricular opportunity. So they have like a Nubian Youth Council, and then also for like high school to college level students, like upper high school, there's also another youth group. So like, get involved at the House of Nubia, take leadership, talk to Amumet Het and all the other organizers, and see what you as youth can do, because this is like a huge, huge initiative. Like, you guys are very blessed to have a space like this. Make this space your own, and like use that as a way also to show colleges that, hey, like I'm Nubian and I'm doing this and all this stuff in the Northern Virginia area. So yeah, and I think that actually, so should we jump to leadership positions? You kind of mentioned it a little bit, but that ties more into the volunteering and work section as well. So volunteering is really, really important, and it shows that you care a lot about your community. And most schools will actually require you to have volunteer hours before you graduate. I think it's minimum 50 hours for most schools, depending on the type of diploma. So like if you want an advanced diploma, then they'll require that you have some level of volunteer hours. Now, people do all sorts of things for volunteering. Some people volunteer at like the hospitals, so like Fairfax Hospital or like Alexandria Hospital or whatever it is, they all have like volunteer programs, but those are really hard to get into. Other people volunteer at like nursing homes, or they do there's like kind of other things, like they do like park cleanups and stuff like that. So your school will typically send you when there's a volunteer opportunity and you can do this type of stuff. Or you can go out, like another really good thing to do that Zainab was just talking about is to find something in your community that you really care about. So for example, the House of Nubia is one of these where you can volunteer here, you can help them when they're hosting events and stuff like that. And you can actually end up counting these towards the hours that you have to do in high school. Other things too are like volunteer at your masjid. Maybe it's during Ramadan, maybe it's during like Jumu'ah prayers during the summer or something like that. Or like figure out what sort of events that they have and you can volunteer there too. And there's so many masjids in this area. If you live around here, then there's like Adam Center. If you live closer to Alexandria and those areas, then there's the Mass Community Center. And they're always looking for volunteers. They're always looking for people to get involved. And so all of you can do that. Or you can go out and create your own volunteer opportunity as well. So for me, a lot of my application and a lot of what I ended up doing in college and after college is work that's involved with Sudan. And so the summer after, I think before my junior year, we were in Sudan, and I decided to do my volunteer opportunity there at this center in Khartoum that was called Khartoum Cheshire Home. It was a center for children with disabilities, like a non-profit center there. And so figure out something that's like unique to you, figure out something that you maybe care about. There are so many events that you can volunteer at, and so there's so many opportunities for you in this area. We'll actually go back to like leadership positions really quickly because that's kind of important. So if you're thinking about, or like maybe your dream school is a more selective college, so let's say your dream school is somewhere like Harvard or Columbia or Duke or anything like that. Zainab was saying this earlier, but I think it's important to stress it. What colleges want to see is not just that you're part of these clubs, but that you're taking leadership in them. Because these are schools that want to see you and want to create leaders, and so these are the types of people that they're looking for to join in the first place, or to when they're applying. And so showing that, for example, like at my high school, I was president of the Muslim Student Association, or like I was also like a part of the board for Model United Nations, and I helped organize a lot of events at my high school. So when I went to college, I ended up doing those same exact things. Like I was the president of the Harvard Islamic Society and stuff like that. And so they want to see that from high school, you've already started this foundation, because then they expect this is the type of person we are admitting to our college. This is what they're going to do here. They're going to lead to a positive contribution to our college campus. And yeah.
And then just to dive into the last thing, which is awards, like this is a really big question. It's like, how do I get an award? What do I need to do? That can look different for everyone. For some people, they're athletes and they get really amazing track or soccer or volleyball awards, and they can include that. For me personally, I was really involved in science fair every year, and when you go to like regionals, they'd have a bunch of cool organizations that would come and see your project and then award you really cool awards that you can include in your application. Again, that's just one idea. There are so many ways you can get an award, and I think we both got the National Water Quality Association Award. So that's a really, really great way to show that, like, again, it showed that I was really interested in water quality and that I was very interdisciplinary, and I would bring that with me to college. So again, that's a really important thing that you can include. That's just how it looked like for us, but it can look like something different for you guys. And it's about really taking that initiative and talking to your counselor, talking to your teachers. There's a really cool program called National History Day. I think I would highly recommend you guys talk to your history teachers about. And they have really cool competitions about, you do like your own individualized project, research project on like something in history that you're really interested in. And they also have regional competitions and state competitions. So do your research, watch YouTube videos, like ask people about like what they did, and use that to kind of guide you to see how you can get an award that you can include in your section. And there's also honor societies that exist in a lot of high schools. My school has History Honor Society, Math Honor Society. These are kind of like in between awards/honors/clubs. So they're groups of students who are really dedicated to, for example, history or math, or even there's something called the National Honor Society, and you have to maintain a certain level of like a GPA and volunteer hours every single semester. But that kind of shows colleges that like you have excelled in the sphere of history or in the sphere of math, and you kind of earn that honor. That kind of counts as an award/honor. So would highly recommend, again, what I'm trying to prove right now is that you guys need to do your own individual deep dives into number one, what am I interested in? What makes me passionate? What makes me tick? And number two, how can I translate that into an award? If you're really interested in math, the National Math Honor Society has these really cool math competitions that they host every single year, and they're really intense, and they're a great way to get an award. If you're really interested in science, look at science fair, take that initiative, talk to your science teacher. Again, ask yourself those questions, and make that into action so you can actually see the results that you want in your application.
Yeah, and the other thing too is that awards are not just through your school. So for example, like when I did volleyball, I went to two different schools for high school. So for one of them, I was part of my school team. For the other one, because I joined late, I couldn't be on the school team. But what I did is instead I played for recreational organizations. So in our area, there's like the BRYC, the Braddock Road Youth Club, and they have like a lot of sports teams. And so whenever we play on those, we ended up winning awards, and these were team awards, but you can still include those on your application because at the end of the day, you're part of this team. There's also awards outside of that. For example, let's say that your masjid hosts Quran competitions, you participate in this, you can include that you won in the Quran competition on your application. Another really big one that I would encourage all of you to get involved in is DC MIST, which is essentially the Muslim Interscholastic Tournament. And so what this is it's a tournament that's held for all of the Muslim students in high schools in this area, and they hold it every single year. I think this year maybe it happened in April, or yeah, I want to say it happened in April. And so it has so many different types of competitions. Like they have, if you're interested in art, they have art competitions. If you're interested in cooking, they have that. If you're interested in sports, they have sports competitions. There's stuff like Quiz Bowl, which like essentially tests you on different types of topics. There's stuff like Knowledge Test, where you read a book and then you do like a test for it. They also have like Science Fair. They have short film, they have community service. So many different types of awards that you're essentially eligible for. And this competition, it's really fun. You get to meet Muslim students from all over this area. It's typically 3 days, and so you begin preparing for it from early. But like DC MIST is a huge opportunity for Muslim students in this area because it's a smaller pool of students. You go with your school, and you're eligible for so many awards that will put you on the map for colleges at the end of the day.
Okay, recommendation letters. This one also can seem really difficult, but you guys are already making a lot of progress in that right now. If you're in high school, recommendation letters, so most schools will require you, it depends on the school, but like, for example, Duke University and a lot of other rigorous universities require 2 recommendation letters from primary teachers that you've had throughout your college experience, preferably those that you've had in your junior or your senior year, preferably junior year if you can, or someone who's known you for a long time in your high school experience, and then also a recommendation from your counselor, which is different from the one from your teacher in that it's more of like an umbrella overview into like, what has the student done? I've observed this student throughout their time of college, and they've gotten really good grades, and they've been involved in so many ways. So the teacher one is more personal to like, how is the student in the classroom? And the counselor one is more of like an umbrella overview. So first things first, it's really hard if you go to a public school to have a good relationship with your counselor. I know this, and I had to fight for my relationship with my counselor because counselors are overworked. They have so many students, and it's really hard for you to form a relationship. But if you have to get in the counselor's office and introduce yourself and tell them about yourself and what you're passionate about and what your dreams are, and make it known that you're not here to play. Because most students, like, they don't actually take that initiative, and counselors get really overwhelmed with like the seniors every year, but you can really make that different if you get to know your counselor as early as possible. So if you're a freshman and a sophomore, now is the time to be having conversations with your counselor about what you want to do and what kind of support you need, so that throughout your high school experience, if you need any help, they'll be there for you, but also when they come to write that recommendation letter for you, they know you, they know what you've been involved in, and they can actually craft something that is not just like generic, but very personal. So when the college admissions officers read it, they're like, okay, this counselor knows the student and what their potential is.
Yeah, and the other thing too, though, is that let's say maybe it's later for you, you're a junior or a senior in college, that's okay too. So for example, for me, for my freshman and sophomore years, I attended the Islamic Study Academy / King Abdullah Academy respectively. And then afterwards, for my junior and senior years, I was at Edison High School. So the things that mattered for me was really focusing in my junior and senior year on creating these relationships that I didn't have the opportunity to do my first 2 years of high school because I wasn't there. So for my counselor, I would set up regular meetings with him where I would talk to him about, oh, this is what I'm interested in. I have questions about this, or like, this is what I'm planning on doing. This is what I'm planning on taking for the next semester. It's up to you to take that initiative because like counselors are only going to remember the people who they interact with a lot. So you have to be someone who makes sure that you're active about this. The other thing too is crafting relationships with your teachers. So a lot of people who go to the same school for all 4 years have the opportunity to take multiple classes with a teacher. For me, what was important to me is that I made sure that I stood out in these classes. So the classes that I really cared about, or the classes that I was really good in, like making sure that the teacher knew what type of a student I was, what I was passionate about, what I cared about, so that they'd be able to write a good recommendation letter for me. And this is something that you can also do through your extracurriculars. So for example, or sorry, not your extracurriculars, but like, you know how there are some classes in high school that you can take that are like more optional. So other than math and English and stuff, you can also take classes that you like care more about. So for example, for some people that's like coding classes or computer science classes. For me, those were like the more political classes. So I took like IB Global Politics as one of my electives, or like I took like additional history classes and stuff like that. And then there's also a misconception, I think, that you have to get like one science or math teacher and one English or like reading teacher to write your recommendation letters. That's not true at all. I actually got one from my, he taught me for 3 classes. So I took history class with him, and I took global politics, and I took a second history class with him. And then I got one from my English teacher from 11th grade as well. And so both of those were essentially from like the social sciences, but that was perfectly fine, and that ended up getting me into the colleges that I got into. So what's important is not necessarily that like you do one math and one like reading, but what's important is actually that you have a good relationship with this teacher, that they know what type of a student that you are, and that they're able to write you like a good long letter that's not generic, but rather something that's like, it tells the schools who you are and who your personality is and what they can expect you to bring in the classroom later on.
Okay, the big question, the application essays. These are really overwhelming, and you really only will think about these practically like when you're starting to apply to colleges. So the college application window opens for seniors in August before their senior year. August 1st is when the Common App opens and when schools start accepting their early action, early decision, and we'll talk about that later. But that's when you have to start, and you should start thinking about this before, but that's when you really are, you know, the application has that essay portion ready for you to go, and you have to start thinking, what am I gonna tell these admissions officers? What do I want them to know? They see the list of my extracurriculars, they see my grades, they have my transcript, and they see the classes that I've taken. But now it's about you putting your voice into your application. This is the only space where you can control like what they essentially see, right? So like your grades, you do your work and you try your best and you get the grades that you want, that's like a letter, right? But this is like where you can be creative, where you can talk about the things that you're interested in, where you can be really practical about like, this is the thing that I want to solve when I go to college. This is what excites me about your university, right? So the main thing is that you have 2 types of essays. That's the common application essay that I was talking about, which is the personal essay. And it's about pretty much anything that you want. Mine was a combination of like a lot of things. I talked a lot about Sudan, but I also talked about my interdisciplinary identity. I'm half Moroccan, I'm very proud of that. So I talked about balancing these 2 very vivid identities that I have, and also talked about like what I was passionate about, and that includes a lot of like sustainable development and things like that. And I'm more than happy to talk about that after this if you guys are interested in it. But your college personal essay, it literally can be anything you want. I've read essays where somebody has started like talking about an Oreo cookie, and they made that branch out into like their entire identity, right? So it might seem funny, and it is funny, but like that's what people have used to be creative and actually like tell the admissions officers like what is unique about them, right? Or you can talk about like a club that you were a part of that really meant a lot to you, or like an experience that you had throughout your life that, you know, it formed your identity, or it helps you kind of navigate life, right? So there's not one right type of essay, which is something that I struggled with in the beginning. I struggled a lot with writer's block. Like I would just like open my computer and not know what to write, or I would think that there was a right way to write the essay. The answer is you'll only feel satisfied with your essay when you make it your own and you actually genuinely ask yourself, what do I want these admissions officers to read? So it should be like, you know, you should have like a lot of components into it. Like you should talk a lot about like what this means into your present life and like what you're going to bring to the table in college. But like, again, it's really all that you want it to be. And there's a lot of support that you get from your English teachers. Like I think my English teacher was a really big help in like throughout AP Lit, kind of giving us example essays and supporting us throughout that process. So your English teachers should hopefully support you. You can also ask a lot of upperclassmen, or you can even ask us like if you want us to read your essays, like what kind of impression it gives. So again, like there's so many resources on the internet and in your schools that can help you put that like essay together. It's a process. It's not going to happen overnight.
nobody has, I mean, there's people that might have done it, but like, you will spend a lot of time on it because it's the most important essay that you have. And it goes to every single school you apply to. So this is like your standard essay. If you're applying for 10 schools, every single one of those 10 schools is gonna get that essay. So you wanna make sure that it's general and that it speaks to you. And then Dean will dive into like supplemental essays and like the school-specific ones.
Yeah, and just like building a little bit more on the personal essay thing, it's really hard to write a personal essay because it's hard to figure out who you are as a person and boil that down to like 650 words, right? Like you are obviously, there's so many different aspects of your personality that you want to try and show, but again, we want to bring you back to this idea that like your application is going to be telling a story about yourself, right? So everything from the classes that you choose to take to your extracurriculars to your personal essay is all going to contribute to your personal story. So I've said before that like something that I was really passionate about is I cared a lot about politics, I cared a lot about like helping people and things like that. So that's what I ended up making my essay about. And so I spent the entire summer before my senior year trying to figure this out, and I would like start so many different drafts and then I'd end up deleting them because I was like, no, this doesn't make sense, this is not what I want to write. And like your essay, it's a process. You're gonna find pieces of it at different times. Sometimes like an idea will just come to you. Like what I would do is I would keep like a notebook next to my bed, or like whenever I just thought of something, I would quickly write it down, and then that would be part of it. And then I'd continue building out these ideas until I had an essay. So for example, for my essay, what I ended up doing is actually I wrote about what I wanted to be at every stage of my life. So I started out from when I was 5 years old, and I was like, when I was 5 years old, I wanted to be like so many random things, like an astronaut and all these other types of stuff. When I got older, like from 6 to 12, I wanted to be a doctor, and then I wanted to be a journalist, and then I wanted to be like a humanitarian, right? So like so many different things, but it basically over time, it built out this story of who I was, what was the common theme and all of the things that I wanted to do throughout my life, right? And this is the essay that ended up working out for me. But I know so many other people who've written essays about different things. So like, for example, like let's say you love playing video games, you play video games a lot, you're at the top of a lot of leaderboards. You can literally write your essay about the video games that you play and how they teach you how to navigate real world scenarios, or how they're like an example of like a world or something like that, or like how it teaches you about how you can make the world anything that you want to be and you can contribute to it and stuff like that. There's so much that you can do with your essay, and so don't narrow it down to like, oh, I have to write about like wanting to be a doctor because colleges want to see me say that I want to help people. It doesn't have to be about that at all. It's really about who you are as a person and what you care about.
One more thing, just like a practical tip, if you're not a senior yet, the best thing I can recommend is just write. Like, I don't think right now, like schools are telling you guys to write enough. Like, write as much as you can. Practice writing. Pull up a computer and just write about a topic. Journal, whatever it takes, because you want your skills to be ready. The worst thing that could happen is that you get a really good idea, but you don't have the writing skills to actually write it when it's time, right? So what you guys should be doing right now, especially in your summer and throughout the year, write as much as you can. Like, it can look like anything, but like make sure you're building that skill over time so that when it comes time, like you're prepared to put together something really great. And I think like also like English, I know my English teachers would always be like, during the summer, our doors are open, our emails are open if you want like any support with anything. Talk to your English teachers about like ways that you can strengthen your writing skills, and read a lot too, because through reading you'll gain like a really big vocabulary, and you'll gain like a lot of tips on like sentence structure and like how to create a compelling story. So like make sure, this is not something that just starts your senior year, this is something that from your freshman year you're building over time, right? So hold yourselves accountable and make sure that you guys are putting in the work from now. Because I know a lot of you guys are probably not seniors yet.
And then just two more things here also is a lot of schools have writing centers, and your writing centers basically have like the best students in your English classes and stuff. Your school's writing center is literally going to go through your essay and work through it word through word and help you. They're like maybe like on sentence structure. If you're struggling even with starting your essay or finding ideas or anything like that, or putting it together, they will help you do all of that. It's the writing center, it's free, it's other students, so like very low stakes if you maybe don't want to show your teacher. So would highly recommend you take advantage of that. And then the second type of essays that we have are the supplemental essay. And so basically these are like shorter school-specific essays, right? So typically most schools will ask you on your application, like write in 200 or 300 words why you want to come to our school, or what will you contribute. And sometimes they ask you really random questions as well. Like they could be like, what's your favorite food to eat? And like explain to us why. Or like, what's your favorite activity? Or what sport do you really like? So they're super, super, random. There's a lot of different types of them. Some of them are optional, but I would highly recommend you take advantage of anywhere that you can to show what type of a person you are, to show what the things that you care about are, or like even the random things. So I remember for I think it was Georgetown University, I was writing my essays, and the last one was like, oh, like, tell us something that people don't really know about you, or like something like that. And I was like, oh, when I'm stressed, I bake. And then I talked about how I love baking when I'm stressed, and I make cakes, and I make brownies, and I make all these different types of things, and how it helps me cope with that. And so they can be really random, but they're all parts of your personality, and sometimes just fun to write as well, and like less stressful than the personal essay.
Yeah. Oh, and one more thing before, there's some schools that they give you the option to even create a video. So when I was applying to Chicago, they give you like 2 to 3 minutes that you can put a video together and kind of like show your face to the admissions officers. So that's also, if you think that's like a really good way for you to be creative, like there's a lot of schools that offer that option too. And I remember like I put together, like I put so much effort into this video. It was so much fun, and it made my college admissions process like a lot of fun, and I was able to like be really creative. So like there's a lot of ways that colleges want you to kind of show your interest and like show your personality. So if you feel like that's a great way for you, like look at schools that offer the option. I know Brown University also has that, and there's a bunch of other schools that probably do too, but the essays are the main thing, so that's just like an additional thing that you might find throughout your process.
And now we'll dive into like more of the mechanical process of the college applications. And so this is essentially how you apply. So there are 3 main ways or main platforms that you use for your applications. The most common one is called the Common App, and we also have like a deep dive into this in the next slide. But essentially it's used for over 1,000 schools, and it's where you'll add, what you do is you have this application portal, and to this portal you'll add all of the schools that you're interested in applying to. So for me, I think I applied to 10 schools. 8 of the schools that I wanted to apply to were all on the Common App. And so you fill out like all of this basic information that's all the same for stuff like it asks you about your name, your demographics, and all of these different types of things. And then it'll also show for every single school you're able to upload like your personal essay, you're able to upload the supplemental essays, so like the school specific ones that they ask and stuff. And so this is like a common platform that's used. And then there's something called the Coalition application. So it's very, very similar to the Common App. It's just a different application system that some schools use for some reason. But you basically do the same thing. So for example, schools in this area that use the Coalition app and not the Common App include like Virginia Tech and the University of Maryland. They both use the Coalition app instead. So like if you're applying to those schools in addition to other schools like George Mason or UVA or whatever, you'll probably find yourself using both of those types of applications. Basically the same thing, just different platforms. Even the personal essay and all that stuff will remain the same for both of them. The only thing that will change is just the school-specific questions that they ask you. And then the last type of school is that some schools are like, choose to be intentionally difficult, and so they don't use either platform, but you just apply directly through their website. So an example of that in this area is Georgetown University. It doesn't use either one of these platforms, so you have to go through their website and create an account there, and then apply through their website to the school.
Yes, so the Common App will be your best friend in that first semester. So the Common Application is basically, they have simplified the process for us. Every school uses, like most schools use the Common Application. It's the most generally used one that colleges prefer. And you basically will be able to, starting August 1st of your senior year, before your senior year starts, you'll be able to log in and create an account. And that's when you can start compiling the schools that you want to apply to onto your Common Application. You have the general part of your Common Application, which is basically like, you know, your general questions, the transcripts, your personal essay, the stuff that's going to go to every single university. And then you have like the different branches for the universities that you want to go to, and that's where you're going to find the other questions that each specific university wants to know from you, and the different essays that they want you to submit. So that's also where your counselor will send your recommendation in. Like think of it like a hub. Everything happens there, and when you're ready to click submit, you're going to click submit, and it's going to turn green, it's going to give you confetti, and you're going to be done, and you won't have to think about it until the decision comes out. And just some other tips, let's see. Yeah, experiment with the Common Application as early as you can. On August 1st, before your senior year, you should make your account, and you should start getting really familiar with the system because you're going to be using it for months on end. And yeah, that's some practical tips.
The other thing too is that, especially for supplemental essays, sometimes colleges change those from year to year, right? So like the Common App essays, there's like 7 different so this is, we're talking about your personal essay. There's 7 different prompts that you can choose from, and like the last one is just choose your own. So just write about anything that you're interested in. So that one is easy to do from early on. But starting August 1st is when you're going to be able to see those school-specific questions, right? Like the schools, like those 300, 200-word essays or questions that each school is going to ask you. And so you'll want to get on the Common App as early as possible, because honestly, if you're applying to like 7 schools or 10 schools or whatever, you're gonna have a lot of essays to write. You'll have well over 20 or 30 essays to write. So you wanna get on there really early so that you can start writing those early, and you're not condensed to like when the applications are due in November or December or something like that.
Okay, the big question, how many schools should I apply to? When you apply to a school, you can get in or you cannot, so you want to make sure that you apply to the amount that's right for you. And what typically is recommended is around 7 to 10 schools. I personally applied to a lot more than that, but that was because I was also applying during COVID, and there was a lot of uncertainty about like applications in general. So to better position myself, I applied to about 19 schools. I don't really recommend that if you don't, because again, remember the circumstance, COVID, very uncertain time. But most people recommend applying to 7 to 10 schools. And you kind of want to bucket them into like these 3 buckets, right? So this all depends on asking yourself 2 questions. Number 1, what type of student am I academically? What are my grades like? What's my GPA? What am I involved in? Am I a really competitive student? Have I scored well on the ACT and the SAT? And then from 2, you'll go into what schools do I want to apply to? And that takes you doing research. When you research, for example, Harvard University or Duke University, you're going to be given some information like acceptance rate, typical range of SAT and ACT scores that are accepted, what type of student the school is looking for, and that can kind of give you an idea of, okay, for Duke University, is this a safety school for me? Is it a target school? Or is it a READ school, right? So typically, safety schools are schools with higher acceptance rates. So for example, like community colleges or schools like, it just depends on the person. Those are the schools that you know or you're pretty confident that you're going to get into, right? That's like your backup, right? So that's super important. You should not ignore that, because in the case that you don't get into your other schools, you have that, right? Then you have your target schools. Those are schools with like medium to kind of low acceptance rates. So think like 20%, 15%, maybe even 25%, 30%, right? So those are schools that like you think you can get into, but maybe not, so you want to shoot your shot. And then READ schools are like your top 10s, your Ivy Leagues, the big name schools. Those are schools that, honestly, even for people with 4.0 GPAs and really impressive stats, like for example, like our schools get like 50 to 60,000 applications every single year. That's a lot of students that are applying. So at one point, it's kind of like, you could be a really great student academically, but there's a lot of other things like what type of class do they want? Like, so it's like, these have really low acceptance rates. Like you're talking like 2 to 3%, 4%, 5%. So those are your schools that are READ schools. That's where you're gonna put all your ambition into, right? When you have a balanced list of schools, you're best preparing yourself to make sure that you're giving your all and you're trying for the schools that you want to go to, but you're also making sure that you have a place to go when you graduate, right? So you don't want to apply to a bunch of READ schools and not have any safety, because in the case that you don't get in, the reality is you won't have anywhere to go. So you want to make sure that, like, this is also going to take a lot of, communicating with your parents and talking with your teachers and your counselors about what's the right list of schools looks like for you. And that's something that you should be doing your junior year and a little bit into your senior year, but as early as you can, look into schools, research universities, look at what makes universities unique. Duke is a big basketball school. If you like basketball, come to Duke. That's a great, that's a great way to kind of like see student life, what is it that you want in school, and that can kind of also help you put your list together. And you should also communicate a lot with your counselor. So I had a lot of conversations with my counselor about what the right list of schools for me was, especially during COVID, and when there was a lot of conversation about how difficult admissions would be that year. So I had a lot of conversations with my teachers to make sure that I was best positioning myself to get into the schools that I wanted to get into. Alhamdulillah. So
yeah, so Zainab said most of it, but here's the thing about when you're creating this list, it's really important that you have that balance, because college admissions are honestly, you can give it your all. You can have a perfect 4.0 and a 1600 and say, oh, based on this, I'm going to apply to all the Ivy Leagues. and you still might not get into any of them, because college admissions are so random. It doesn't matter, like you've done all of these things and you've given it your all and you've basically said, Bismillah, tawakkaltu ala Allah. But even after then, it's still, like there's just so much that we don't know that goes into the process of how they choose who's going to come to these schools. So that's why it's really, really important to have these balance. Now, the other thing that I recommend is don't just apply to a school based on the name, because not every school is going to be right for you. You should do a lot of research into the schools that you want to go to, right? So research, for example, like if you're applying to schools that are further away from this area, research what that area is like. Is it a city? Do I need a car? Do I need a car to get around to different types of places? Can I get around easily? What is the campus environment like? What is the surrounding city environment like? Or like, what are the schools? Are there a lot of Muslim students? Like for me, that was something that was really important. Are there a lot of Muslim students at this school? Do I see a lot of people who like wear hijab at this school? Because I don't want to be the only one. Like stuff like that. This was all stuff that's going to impact what your life is like once you're actually at college. Or like if you want to apply to schools closer to home, there are so many that are in this area that are really great schools that I would highly recommend you visit. And here's the other thing too. Once you're in your junior and senior year, there are two things that you can do to sort of get more familiar with colleges. One, you could actually go and visit the school. So for example, like George Mason University is really close in the area. The University of Maryland is like pretty close. George Washington University, Georgetown University, all of these colleges have information sessions. You just need to go and take a look at when they are. Like search up on their website and it'll tell you, oh, we have college information session for people in these years from this time to this time and on this day. And they're typically on weekends, and so you should be able to attend. The other thing is if maybe like these schools are further away and you don't want to make the drive, is that a lot of these people come to these schools. So like they'll have recruiters come from these universities to your school. So I remember my school had like a ton of them. There were people who came from George Washington. There were people who came from like Johns Hopkins, which is further away. There were people who came from UVA and Virginia Tech and all of these schools. And they'll come to your school and they'll give you a session, and your counselors, and this information will also be on like your school website, and your counselors will tell you about it. But they'll give you all of this information, and then you can ask them as many questions as you want. You can ask them about what financial aid looks like. You can ask them about like, let's say that you're really interested in a certain type of extracurricular and you can't find that information on their website. Like, do you have a recreational soccer team, for example? You can ask this recruiter. They will probably know the answer to that question, and they'll be more than happy to talk to you. The other thing too is that it shows that you're interested in the school. And sometimes, not all the time, they'll like write down the names of these people, and so it might give you even like a little extra boost on your application as well, because they see, oh, this person is really interested. They came and they visited our school, or they came to an information session that we held for them. And so all of these things are really, really helpful for ending up choosing which colleges you're going to apply to. And even after you get into college, it's the same thing. Visit the schools, talk to people who are there, learn what it's actually like, and pick the school that's right for you.
Yeah, and another thing, like the big question of like money, that's a really tough thing to think about. And like for my family, I'm the first in my family to like go to college in the United States, and like my parents had no idea like what financial aid looked like. We would see the price tags on universities, and it'd be like these crazy big amounts. You have to also do research on like the financial aid of that university. So Harvard is a really good example, and Duke kind of like schools that give excellent financial aid, and they make sure that you're able to afford coming into like 2 more. Oh, okay. Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit about that, but that's also something that you should look at when you're kind of positioning yourself like, what's my reach school, what's my safety school? Make sure that you're also thinking about money, and you've had those conversations with your counselor and with the admissions officers that come to your school.
And the very last part, and sorry, we know that we're over time, but there's kind of a lot to cover. So the very last part here to talk about is actually that these like college applications are not free, unfortunately. Every part of the college process costs money, and application fees are not cheap either. So it can cost like between $60 to $100 to apply for one school, and then you'll have to do that for multiple schools. To send you to take the SATs, it costs money. To send your transcripts to school, it also costs money. So you want to factor this into your decision. If you are eligible for free and reduced lunch, or if you are considered low income, or even for some schools, like if you like make like an income under $80,000 or under $100,000 a year, you could be eligible for a fee waiver, which basically means that you apply for free to these schools, right? So make sure you look into that. Talk to your counselor, or like even Google on the school's website, Google online, and figure out, does this school have a fee waiver or not? Because that's gonna save you so much money in the application process, and is really, really, really important to research into, especially as we like end up talking about the price tag that's actually on going to college and stuff.
Okay, this can be really confusing. There's different windows when you're applying, right? So you can apply to a school, the two main branches that you want to think about is early or regular. Early means November, regular means January, right? In terms of early, that breaks into two things. You have early decision. Early decision means that if you apply to that school and you get in, you have to go. There's no option. So for example, Duke University and a lot of other big universities have the early decision programs. They're binding, so you only apply to it when you're confident that this is the school that you want to go to, and there's no other option for you, like this is your dream school. I personally didn't do that just because there was, again, during COVID, a lot of uncertainty, and I also preferred to have the flexibility to choose the college that I wanted to. So like, once I got all my acceptances, I went through the process with my family of talking about what I wanted and like what was right for me, and that's how I came to the decision of Duke. But highly in terms of if you're gonna apply to early decision, really think about it. It does give you a higher chance slightly of getting in. It depends on the school because you are making clear to the university that you're committed to them and that they're your number one priority. But it's not something that's right for every family, and especially considering financial aid and things like that. And then early action, which is the program that Harvard has, and she can talk a little bit about that. But the difference is that it's not restrictive, meaning you can apply to a lot of early action schools unless they say they're restrictive early action. That's what Harvard is. So it means that you can only apply to Harvard early action. That's a private school. When I'm saying all this, it's private schools. So Duke and Harvard are both private schools. Virginia Tech, UVA, George Mason, those are public schools. So these categorizations really exist for private schools. So you can apply to, for example, Harvard, and then at the same time apply to UVA and VT because those are public schools, but you can't apply to Harvard and Yale both early. That might seem confusing, and it'll be clear as you kind of go through the process, and it's a kind of a lot to swallow, but the main branches you want to think about are early decision, restrictive. I love this school, I will go to it. Early action, restrictive early action, I'm interested in this school, I really like this school, but I can make the decision at the end of the day if I choose to go here or not. And then regular decision is where all the chaos happens.
Yeah. And so honestly, I would not recommend that you apply to any school's early decision, just because essentially if you get accepted, then you have to go no matter what. So there are some people who apply early decision because this is their dream school, and they end up getting their financial aid packages, and then they find out that it's $40,000 or $50,000 a year that they have to pay. You have to pay that. You have to go to this school. You've made this commitment. You have to go. You can't back out of it. And so you're going to be tied no matter what. And so it becomes really hard. It also becomes really hard to negotiate with schools on this basis if you're trying to lower what your financial aid contribution is and stuff. Then early action and restrictive early action. So I did a lot of these. I told you I applied to 10 schools. I actually applied to 5 early action and 5 regular in the regular decision round. And so what I did for early action is I applied to Harvard, which was restrictive early action. So that was the only private school that I applied to by November 1st. And then for 4 other schools, they were all public. So George Mason, William and Mary, Virginia Tech, UMD, those are all examples of public schools. And so I applied to a bunch of them in the early action round. And then the regular decision round, which is typically due by December or January 1st, I applied to 5 other schools. And then you get all of your decisions back. So the good thing about early action or early decision is essentially you get your decisions back earlier than everybody else. So the really weird thing for me is that the first school that I actually got into was Harvard, and that was in December because they released their applications early. So that's before a lot of people have even applied. So that's why people like to apply early action or restrictive early action to schools that they really love, because it gives you a slightly higher chance of getting into that school than if you apply in the regular round. So the schools that I was really wanted to get into, I applied to those earlier, and then the schools that I was okay, I'm interested in these schools and I would love to get in, but it's not my favorite thing or not the one that I care the most about, then I applied to them in the regular decision round. And I think that that's a good way to sort of think about this in terms of when you're thinking about what to apply. It's also totally fine if you decide to apply to all of them in the regular decision round. A ton of people do that too. But yeah.
Financial aid. So this is the big one. When you look up a university and you see that price tag, ignore it. That's not what you're gonna have to pay. Duke University, for example, for like really rich families, it's like $91,000 a year, meaning over the course of your 4 years, you're paying almost $500,000 to send your child to school, which is like absolutely ridiculous and not realistic for a lot of us. So a lot of these schools will have financial aid, and that's a really great way of like making sure that they take it into account how much money does your family make, and realistically, how much can you afford to pay to come to this school? So everybody's financial aid package is gonna look different depending on how much money their family makes. So in terms of applying for financial aid, this happens as you're applying to your colleges, right? So if you wanna be eligible for financial aid from Duke, for example, you have to submit, and this is a lot of schools, you have to submit the FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid. This is like from the government, right? So they make sure that they get all your financial information and they send it to the schools, and you can also be Pell eligible. So Pell eligible, the Pell grant is basically money that you can get from the government for low income students to kind of support them in their college process. And then the CSS profile is like another version, and this is by the College Board, which also runs the AP Scholar program. The CSS profile is much longer, it's more exhausting, but it does like a really big deep dive into like how much money does your family make, what assets does your family make, if your family owns a home, how much value does that home have? If you're paying mortgage, how much do you have left? How much are you renting for? What cars do you have? All these things they factor in to determine your expected family contribution, or your EFC. So your EFC is like this rough number that the CSS and the FAFSA will kind of send to these universities, and that will kind of help guide the financial aid office at that respective school. So for example, Duke's financial aid office will take in those numbers for the students that have been admitted and generate a number for you that they believe is affordable for you to pay. So for a lot of people, sometimes they do have conflict where they're like, this is too expensive for my family, or I've sent you all my financial information, yada, yada, yada. But what you can do then, and what I did a lot, and like when I had all my schools to kind of like make a decision, is I can like argue back and say, I have a lot of other acceptances to really good schools, like, can you please like figure out if you can reduce this for me, right? You, at that point, you kind of also have the upper hand, and you can kind of try to negotiate, plead your case, talk about your family's experiences, yada, yada, yada. The financial aid officers, they're people, so they understand, and they can make adjustments to your financial aid, so don't get scared by that number and think it's the only thing. You can have conversations with the financial aid officer and think about realistic ways for your family to be able to pay for your student to go to college. And these two are really important. The biggest thing is the FAFSA, especially if you're low income. Very, very important. Make sure that you get that Pell Grant, and make sure that you, like once you get into college, you're gonna be redoing this every single year. So this is not something that you do in the beginning and you stop, because they understand that a family's financial situation will change. So freshman year you'll do it, sophomore year you'll do it, until you graduate, inshallah. And yeah, these colleges are really flexible. They do have a lot of money, like a lot of them do have a lot of money. Some of them, they might be a little more difficult to get money out of, and that's where like you can also use scholarships and other things to kind of support your educational journey.
Yeah, and I think the negotiation piece is really important. So what you should do is, I mean, like, unless the school has told you, oh, I'm gonna give you a full ride, and it's like a really great school, and you wanna commit to it early on before you get all your decisions, then go ahead and do that. But typically, you'll get your financial aid decisions for all of your schools sometime around like February or March, and then you have until May 1st to commit to your school. So in that time in between, look at your financial aid packages and which schools are giving you the most money. And if not, that's not the school that you want to go to your financial aid office and negotiate. I did that with Harvard. I went to them and I was basically like, these 3 schools have given me more money than you are giving me, and I have to pay less. So I really want to go here, but I can't afford it. Can you match this offer? And then they look at it, and then they'll decide whether they want to like reduce the amount of money that you have to pay or not. So this is just like something that you should think of. FAFSA and CSS, mark the dates that they open, mark the dates that they're due by. You will see it, I don't actually know what it is this year anymore, but it's typically, I think, by, like, do them as early as you can, so that you can get your financial aid decisions early and you're able to like decide holistically. And so yeah, from your FAFSA, you'll get your expected family contribution, that number, whatever it is. Don't get scared by it. It's typically gonna be a lot higher than you're gonna end up paying. And then from the CSS, that's where they really get into all the details, and it's important to report this information accurately so that they're able to like guess as best as possible. And let's say that maybe something happens to your family between the time that like you applied to college and you submitted all these things and the time that you actually get in. Like la qadar Allah, during COVID, a lot of people ended up losing their jobs between that time, right? So what you do is go to your college's financial aid office and tell them, hey, this happened to my family. We can't afford to pay this amount of money anymore. Or like even like they have spaces on these applications where you write things like, this is my family situation. So for a lot of people who are Sudani right now, you're supporting your family in Sudan, right? Because a lot of people have lost their jobs and stuff like that. You can write that in there. I'm supporting this many family members in Sudan. I have these obligations, so I'm supporting people outside of my household. Can you please reduce the amount that my child is going to end up paying? And typically these schools will give you a reduction. So it's really important to keep this into account. Then the other part that's really important as well is scholarships. Scholarships are going to be huge for colleges. So there's something that's called merit-based scholarships and something that's called need-based scholarships, right? So for example, when I think about like Harvard, the way that you apply for financial aid is need-based, right? They take into account all of your things. And for Harvard, I think now it's like if you make under, it's either if you make under $80,000 or $100,000. So they've raised it from when I first started college, you go to school for free, right? But let's say you make over that amount and like, or for other schools, for public schools, that amount is like a lot lower, right? So like if you make like over like, I think under like $30,000 or $40,000 for a lot of public schools in this area, then you go for free. If you make over that, you're expected to pay some amount of money. Now the way that you can reduce that is by getting these scholarships. So outside of the need-based ones, you get like these merit-based scholarships. And so some of these can come from the school, right? So schools like Johns Hopkins, or schools like George Mason, or the University of Maryland. Some of them even have, like George Mason and the University of Maryland, I know, have full ride scholarship programs that are entirely merit-based. So these are based on how well you do in school, how well you do on your test scores, and in your applications and stuff like that. So when you get into the school, they'll tell you, oh, congratulations, you've gotten in. You're also eligible for this full scholarship at our university. And sometimes there are like more steps. So they'll make you do like an interview, or they'll make you kind of go in. For George Mason, it's like a weird round of tests that you have to do. But once you're done with that and you do the interview and you pass all those things, they'll give you a full scholarship. So these are things that you're eligible for from the school. Then the other part of this is that you can apply for scholarships online. And there are so many types of scholarships. There are scholarships for Muslim students. There are scholarships for Black students. There are scholarships for like African students. So look for those, for example, I know Fairfax County has a database where they load all of the scholarships on there that students are eligible for. And some of them are really great. Some of them are like for the state of Virginia or for students in Fairfax County. So they're like, there's like a smaller range of students that are eligible for, so they're less competitive and they're easier to get to. And so there are a few of these that are like really great. So for example, Questbridge, this one is income-based, so for low-income families, you can apply to Questbridge, and it's essentially a full scholarship. You add all of the schools that you're interested in and applying to, you apply for the scholarship, and if you get it, you go to any one of those schools that you added for a full ride. And that one is need-based. The Gates Scholarship is, I think, also need-based, so this is by like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The Harry F. Byrd Scholarship is one that's eligible for students just in the state of Virginia, and they basically pick one student from every single district in Virginia, so there are 11 districts, so 11 students for the state, and then they give you like, it used to be $15,000, now it's $25,000. And so this, and the thing about scholarships too, is some money will go directly to the schools, so some of these like the Questbridge or the Gates Scholarship, this is money that goes directly to your school. For example, the Harry F. Byrd one, that's actually money that they deposit in your bank account. And they want you to use it for educational purposes, but it's yours to, at the end of the day, use it for whatever you want. Like they're giving it to you to help with your educational process all the way. Then there's Coca-Cola Scholars, Burger King. The Ron Brown Scholar Program is a really great one for if you're like, well, all of you are Black students. So it's a really great one for all of you because it's specifically for Black students, so a narrow branch. And even if you don't necessarily win the scholarship, they also just have a program that has really great things, like they'll send you fee waivers for college, and they'll also have like a lot of like information sessions, and they'll pair you with a mentor and stuff like that. So there's so many different types of scholarships. Highly recommend that you end up like searching which scholarships are the best for you, which ones you think you're going to be eligible for.
Okay, so the big idea that we want you to get is that even if you're not a senior, you should be thinking about college from now. Not like obsessively, but like you should be thinking about practical ways that you're preparing yourself to apply for college and you're doing research on these schools. So this is just like a timeline. Everyone's timeline looks different. This is not like a one-size-fits-all, but this can be a really helpful guide to kind of like help you prepare for like what you should be doing at each stage of your high school journey. So starting off with like sophomore year, that's really when you start like you've already gotten comfortable in high school, you know what you want, and you know which classes you're going to take junior year. Make sure that you're starting to think about the SAT and the ACT, that you're looking at volunteer opportunities, that you're in the clubs that you want to be involved in. And if you're not, use that summer as a chance to like change your course and make sure that like you're really thinking about, am I preparing myself to apply for these schools? And honestly, like a really great way to like prepare, like to get yourself familiar with the college process is to like research these schools, watch YouTube videos. During COVID, because we literally could not visit any schools, like they had no tours, and I had to make my decision without visiting schools. I watched so many YouTube videos from people who go to these schools, talking about their experiences, what programs and opportunities and majors exist at these schools, and that was really helpful. And those YouTube videos exist right now. So look up like a Duke or Harvard day in my life and listen to these students from these schools, or ask us, and we're more than happy to kind of give you an idea of what our universities are kind of involved in. And then you can talk a little bit about junior year, since that one is kind of a journey.
Oh, yes. So in your junior fall, so junior year is a really, really, really important year, because basically this is actually the most important year. Because in senior fall, the first semester of your senior year, at this point you've already essentially sent off your applications to colleges, right? So junior year is going to be the biggest year that they take into account. So in your junior fall, you're going to start by taking the PSAT or the PACT or whatever it is. So you're going to take that practice exam, right, that you should have been studying for from before. Then what you should do, or what I recommend that you do, is that you register to take your first SAT, right? Like if you feel well prepared, if you think that you've studied, if you've maybe done good on the PSAT, then you should register to take your first SAT and just see where you score. See what are the areas that maybe you need more work in. Remember that most schools, you don't have to submit all of your scores for. So because of that, you kind of have flexibility in the number of times that you take the test. So the first time, it's okay if you don't do as well on it. That's totally fine. The other thing that you should begin doing is drafting your resume. So start to put together the list of all the things that you've done throughout high school. What are all of the awards that I've won? What are all of the extracurriculars that I've participated in? All of those things. Also meet with your school and college counselor, and if you haven't introduced yourself already, if you maybe weren't as active with them in your freshman or sophomore year, take that chance in your junior year and really get to know them and introduce who you are, what you care about, so that they know you. And then also, I cannot stress this early enough, scholarships are open from your freshman year of high school. You should start applying for them as early as possible and just trying to earn as much money as you can, because college is really expensive. And so, but if you haven't, by that point, start in your junior fall, definitely start applying for scholarships at this point. Then junior spring, take the rest of your SATs, work more on applying for these scholarships, start to put together more of your college application. Start thinking about what your essay is going to look like. What is the story that you're going to tell about yourself? What do you really care about? So think about all of these things. The other thing too is, this is another thing I can't stress enough, every senior in your high school is going to be asking your teachers for recommendation letters at the same exact time, right? Come senior fall, everyone's going to be asking their teachers for recommendation letters. Introduce yourself early. By your junior spring, go and ask the people who you think are going to be great recommenders for you, who you want to write your recommendation letters. Start to ask them and be like, hey, would you be able to write a recommendation letter for me next year? If they say yes, great. Send them an email and be like, just a quick reminder that I would like for you to write my recommendation letter. By the way, you're going to end up reminding them 100 times over and over and over again. For me, one of my teachers, he taught me for 3 of my classes. I talked to him from my junior year, and this is the day that the application was due. He still had not submitted that recommendation letter for me. So you really, really, really have to chase after them, because they have, I graduated with 500 other students. 500 other students who are probably asking the same exact teachers for recommendation letters. So you want to start as early as possible and get them. If they can write it for you junior summer, that's going to be great if they can send it to you that early. You want to take on the last one?
Yeah, and then senior fall is where you just get your snacks and you gotta do it. That's when it's just you planned, you've done the work these past 3 years. You can't change the past, but you can change how you approach right now. And that's when you're gonna be locking in essentially and getting those applications in. this is where it's not only important, I think the biggest thing I would say is like number one, make sure your foundation, your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is firm and that you rely on Him the entire way through, because it is so difficult, you guys. Like, probably the hardest period of my entire high school year, high school trajectory was those few months when I was applying. And I think a lot of people have that same experience, but like, if you realize that it's all in His hands and you're just doing your best, and whatever happens is like the best outcome, then khalas, like you know that you'll feel that satisfaction at the end of the day because you've done your best. But like also at the same time, rely on the people around you. Your parents are all here and they brought you here for a reason. Like my mom used to always like come upstairs with like a bowl of fruit, and she wouldn't say anything, and she would just put it right next to me, and that's all I needed to feel support. So make sure that you you lean on the people around you, and you show your gratefulness to them, because that will kind of give you the stability to keep going. And get it in. Make a schedule. Whatever way a schedule looks for you. I had a planner, but I also used Google Docs to make a calendar of when I wanted each application to go in. Make sure you hold yourself accountable. Nobody is holding you accountable but yourself. And if you're organized from the very beginning and you figure out what system works for you, I promise you're gonna see results, inshallah. And like, no matter what happens, you're gonna know that you did your best, and khalas, al-khayr fi ma ikhtarakallah, right? So make sure that you're on top of your teachers. Like Dean said, do not let a single teacher forget about you. Reminder emails. Hey, don't forget about me. Remember we said you'll submit my recommendation letter. Mr. Chuzo was my counselor. I was always emailing him about like, are my transcripts in? Am I ready to go? Is there anything I need to do? Right? So be in constant communication with the people around you. If you need somebody like us to read your essay, get in contact with us as soon as possible so we know to look out for it, right? Because like we're like the people that are around you that are here to support you, like the many college students that exist in our Nubi community, we're here for you and we want to help, but that takes you first being organized and then coming to us with your essays ready to go so we can read them for you and give you practical feedback, right? So I can't stress this enough, be organized. The worst thing you can do for yourself is be messy. If you need help developing an organizational system, I'm more than happy to help you, but that's my biggest recommendation for your senior fall, and just keep doing it. And like, rely on Allah and do what you gotta do. And that is the essence of tawakkul, right? It's like that I've done everything that I could do, but I understand that it's all in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's hands, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never like lets your efforts go. Like He will give you satisfaction, inshallah, in whatever He chooses for you, and that's all you could ask for at the end of the day in this process, right? So it's not about where you go, but it's about finding satisfaction in the school. Like, so for example, like for me, Duke was not on my list until the very last second, and I never thought I would be happy at Duke, but I'm more than grateful to be there. Like, I can't express it enough. It's the perfect place for me, but that took me being open and me being organized and me being practical with myself about like what I had to do, and you'll be fine. So rely on the people around you, and inshallah everything will go fine. I don't want this to be stressful. This should be a journey. It's gonna be stressful, that's practical, but it's a journey that you can make your own, and inshallah, like you have people like us here to support you, and we want to see so many Nubians, so many of us in these big universities, in universities of all shapes and forms, and see you guys succeed, inshallah. So that's what I would say.
Nice. Zainab said pretty much everything very perfectly, but I will add on one more like thing about the actual application process. What helped me the most also is with recommendation letters. Beginning of your senior year, what I did is I literally took and I went to Walmart and I bought folders for each of one of my recommenders, and then I printed out the first paper, had every single school that I was applying to and all of the deadlines for the applications. Actually, what you should do is maybe put like an earlier deadline than what the application is, so you're not sending to the last minute. And the second thing that I did is I printed out my resume and I said, here's all of the things that I participated in. Here's all of the stuff that I did outside of your classroom, so that they knew exactly who I was and they knew how to write a recommendation letter for me. So like what Zainab said is so important. Being organized is going to be your best friend during the college applications process. Like I put together an Excel so that I would have like what the deadlines for everything was and everything like that. And like you can literally write it down on a piece of paper or have an agenda or have a planner that writes down when all of these deadlines are, because there's so many different things to try and remember. Using different platforms like Khan Academy that will send you daily reminders. Hey, do your SAT practice today. Like every single day, it would send me an email. Do your SAT practice today, and then I'd open it, and then I'd do that SAT practice and stuff like that. Like that's going to be your best friend, and it's going to help keep the college process as manageable as possible for you.
And then the other part of this is also, as Zainab said, like at the end of the day, not every school is going to be the perfect fit for you, and I cannot stress this enough. Like college is 4 years of your life. don't just apply to a school because like someone told you to apply to it, or because like it has a prestigious name or something like that. Apply to schools because you care about them, because you think that this is a good place that I want to spend 4 years of my life here. There are some people who end up applying to like schools that they think are really great names, and they go there and they find like there's no Muslims, right? And that makes it really, really hard experience for them for the entire 4 years that they're there. And so for me, like, it was really important to be able to find that sense of community. And the college application process isn't always going to turn out the way that you think it is. For me, my dream school for the longest time was Georgetown University. I didn't end up getting enough financial aid, but subhanAllah, like, I ended up going to Harvard, and look how that turned out for me. So, like, you never know what's in store for you. Don't be disappointed by the process. There's gonna be like so many ups and downs and stuff like that. You might get accepted to some schools, you might get waitlisted, you might get rejected. Whatever it is, like, just trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that you're gonna end up in the right place. So whatever happens, it happens in khair. And that's honestly, like, I think, like, probably the best piece of advice that we can give you. Don't stress about this process. You have so many resources in your community. We're gonna send around this PowerPoint, but also we'll give you our email addresses so that you're able to email us with any questions that you have. If you ever want us to review your essays or anything like that, if you wanna just talk about like what you're gonna do for your junior and senior years of high school, we are more than happy to be your resources for this type of stuff. Because we had people in this community who talked to us about it, and this is how we got to know what college was like, so we wanna be that resource for you as well.
Shout out me, who was a resource for me.
But yeah, and that's basically, I think that's it. In the back here, so again, we're gonna send this out. We have like a bunch of resources, so these are all links that you can go and check out on applying to college, number of colleges to apply to, stuff that explains all the stuff that we talked about, and then a ton of examples of scholarships and like the college application portals and stuff. And yeah, and you all got this. We believe in you.
Maybe we'll open it up a little bit for questions. If you guys have any questions about this process or anything like that, you're more than welcome to ask.
Does anyone have any questions? Feel free to like raise your hand or whatever.
That means you did a good job.
I know, I was gonna say you did a great job. Okay, no one has any questions. It's okay if you don't want to ask them here. You can like email us too.
Yeah.
I'll put like our emails maybe at the end of this PowerPoint.
Yeah.
And then we can send it around to anyone who wants it.
We would like just to thank you for this wonderful session, and it was really informative, and I hope everybody likes it.
Thank you
It's
so
like,
much.
I'm pretty sure Carlos and I was just